Okay, so a new audio recording has come out showing that Amber Heard was abusive against Johnny Depp. Let's take a look at this article. I can't promise I won't get physical again. I get so mad I lose it. Listen as Amber Heard admits to hitting ex-husband Johnny Depp and pelting him with pots, pans, and vases. An explosive audio confession. Hello, it's Blue Orange 22. So I want to do a quick video on this development in the Amber Heard Johnny Depp case, where basically Amber Heard is admitting that she was violent and abusive towards Johnny Depp. Now I know I'm in the middle of my series on the young male crisis and male privilege, and I said my next video was going to be about the education gap and the education crisis with boys. I am going to get to that, I promise. I've been kind of behind, but I do want to do this video quickly as this story is just coming out. So basically, this was a big story a few years ago with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, and most people and most media sources were blaming Johnny for being violent and abusive, and Amber Heard was claiming that she was a victim of domestic violence and that Depp was abusive towards her, and there were boycotts against Depp and people were saying you shouldn't work anymore. But now this is coming out showing that she was in fact violent and abusive towards him. So let's take a look. Amber Heard admits to hitting Johnny Depp in explosive audio confession. She said, "I was effing hitting you." And you can read the article. I linked it in the description below. It shows a transcript of what they were saying, where Amber Heard did in fact admit multiple times to being violent multiple times. And I know a lot of people don't like the Daily Mail as a source. I know it's not a great source all the time, but they do show stories that other sources and other media publications won't print. And Perez Hilton did this story as well, and I think it's pretty safe to say that Perez Hilton is not a right-wing source. But take a look at some of these pictures, because Amber is kind of trying to downplay and deny what she did, but this is Johnny Depp with a black eye. And this is him with a bleeding finger, which was allegedly caused by her throwing things at him. So the picture evidence is pretty clear. But what I find most interesting about this story, and what I'm kind of curious to see what happens next, is that Amber Heard is a feminist, and she's a domestic violence advocate, and she's part of feminist groups that talk about domestic violence. You can see here, Heard, an ambassador for women's rights, an outspoken domestic violence advocate, taunts Depp for fleeing the late night dust-up, telling him, "You are such a baby, grow the F up, Johnny." So a feminist who is part of domestic violence groups, domestic violence advocacy groups, taunts a man because he doesn't like being a victim of domestic violence. Feminists always talk about how they're against gender roles and gender stereotypes, and they're for equality. But look at this. She's mocking a man for being a baby because she's hurting him. Now, what I'm curious to see is, what will these feminist groups do? What will feminists say about this story now that it's come out that Amber Heard was in fact violent towards Johnny Depp? I remember 3-4 years ago, they were all defending Amber Heard, saying, oh, Depp was the one who was abusive. But what are they going to say now? Will they still defend her? Will they still have her in these groups? Because if you're really against gender roles, if you're really against gender stereotypes, if you really believe in equality, and if you really are against domestic violence, can you really still have her as a spokesperson for your group? Because that would be a little bit hypocritical. Another point, something that I haven't done a video on yet, but I think I want to in the future, and I think I will after my series on the young male crisis, is how a lot of women who kill men are being released from prison because of the defense of domestic violence and domestic abuse. I actually did a Reddit write-up on this. It'll be the last link in the description below. In the UK right now, women who kill their husbands or their ex-husbands are being released from prison or being set free because they're using the defense of domestic violence and domestic abuse. Imagine if that same thing was happening here and Amber had killed Johnny and then claimed that she was defending herself from domestic violence, which 3-4 years ago is what everybody believed, and she was set free. That's a pretty scary thing if 50% of the population can kill the other 50% of the population and then claim domestic violence and then escape prison time for it. But that's going to be another video. Do read that description below though, because it is something that's happening. It is quite scary. There's one case where a woman beat her husband to death. He was in a wheelchair and she beat him to death with a stick, and she was found innocent in half an hour in court, and she was let go with no punishment at all. But again, that's kind of a different story, and that's kind of for a different video. I just thought this was kind of interesting because I remember when the story first happened, everybody was so sure that Johnny was the one who was guilty and Johnny was the one who was abusive, and feminists 100% defended Amber Heard. And in fact, Amber Heard is part of feminist groups that talk about domestic violence, and now this is coming out. What is the reaction going to be? I do kind of find that interesting. So I put all these articles down below, read them, and tell me what you think.